Peter Charles here, Hooked Fly Fishing, and welcome to my video on getting started in fly tying. Today we're going to look at tools that we use in fly tying, and more specifically I'm going to take some time looking at the essential tools and what level of quality you should be buying to get your money's worth. Now, if you've thought about getting involved in fly tying, you've probably seen the kits that are available. Some of the kits are actually pretty decent, and some of them not so much. I'm not recommending a kit, and there's a reason. I find that when you buy a kit, you end up buying stuff that you don't use and you will never use. So I think it's better to pick the right tools and the right materials that are going to be relevant to you. It may be more expensive initially. Down the road, it's cheaper. So this is taking a long-term view of fly tying, not a short-term view of how to get started with a minimum amount of fuss. So let's get started at looking at the tools. And let's start with the essential ones. And the most essential one, of course, is the vise. Okay, I have a vise here, and I have two mounting systems. I have the clamp, which, as you can see, has a hole here and is designed to be clamped on a table. That's fine if you have a table that you don't care about, but if it's your wife's dining room table, don't do that. You have another choice. It's called a pedestal. And this is heavy, and it's meant to stay put while you tie flies. And it's got cork underneath or other soft material that won't mark a surface. The clamp is better to hold things securely. The pedestals sometimes move a little bit, but it's better if you're going to be putting it on furniture you don't want to mark up. Now, onto the vise. Now, let's talk about this vise for a second. This is called a rotary vise, and if I turn this vise, the fly shaft, the shank of the fly and the shaft of the vise stay in line so I can rotate it and everything stays level. That's a fairly expensive vise. Not everybody needs that level of vise to get started. There are simpler vices out there that will do the job. They don't rotate, but they work. And I started on one of those. I started on what's called a Thompson A. And it was perfectly adequate. It worked just fine. You couldn't spend the rest of your life tying flies on a Thompson A. So there are plenty of good vices out there that range $80 to $100. I highly recommend that you do not buy the $30 vise. The problem with those is they don't hold the hook securely. And even in the early days, if you manage to get them to hold the hook securely, a few months down the road, if you tied a number of flies on them, they start getting sloppy and you can't get them tight. It's just cheap metal. So, $80 to $100 is going to get you a vise that you can use for the rest of your life. So I'd recommend that. There's some, Integra has them. It's kind of a Regal style vise, Thompson A. There's a bunch of them out there in that price range that's going to work just fine for you. So I'll, go for something in that range. If you want to spend more money, go for the rotary vise like you see here. They're even better, but you're going to spend $200 plus for those. So just be aware that they aren't cheap. But, I'll leave that up to you where your budget fits. Okay, let's move on to the next essential piece, which is the scissors. Now, I have two kinds here. This is a straight scissor, and it has a relatively sharp point, as you can see. Now, these scissors are not cheap. I think they were about $25, $30, something like that. Do not scrimp on your scissors. Do not go, I'll buy $10 scissors. No. This is where you'll get a lot of frustration. If your scissors are not very good, you're not going to be a happy camper. You're going to have a lot of problems cutting materials and cutting them cleanly. And you're going to be fighting them the whole time. So take the time and effort and the money to buy decent scissors. Now, these are straight. These are the curved scissors. So there's both types. And you can get them in different sizes. Some are bigger, some are smaller. I'd suggest starting off with one pair and getting a straight pair. And down the road, you can buy the curved scissors. But to get started, one good straight pair of scissors will do a lot of good work for you. Just don't cut wire with them. You'll ruin them on the wire. You can use cheap nail clippers for that. Okay, the next thing we're going to buy and look at is what's called a bobbin. It holds our thread. Now, the essential part of the bobbin, you don't have to spend a lot of money, but you see, this has a liner. It's a ceramic liner. The ceramic liner is important because if you don't have a lined bobbin, what happens as you tie and you tie and you tie, the thread grooves a dent in the end of the bobbin, and that will end up cutting your thread. So you'll end up with thread with lots of raggedness to it, or just literally shears it right off. So you want one that has a ceramic liner in it. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on bobbins. Just make sure it has a liner and you're good to go. Now, one other cheap tool, and this is, don't have to spend money on this at all. It's really cheap. This is the cheapest of the cheap. It's a threader, just to help you thread the bobbin. You can do it without a threader. It's just more bother, and plus you're putting the thing in your mouth, and if you've ever had something like Campylobacter, you don't want that, all right? So there are nasty bugs in fly tying. Don't put stuff in your mouth. And guys, they thread these by, just buy a threader. Okay, the next thing you're going to look at is the Hackle pliers. And you can see they're spring-loaded. And the idea is that when we want to wind hackle, and we'll look at that later, when winding hackle, you need something to hang on to the hackle. You can do it with your fingers, but it's a pain. Just buy one pair of hackle pliers. I've got 2 different styles here. Pick the style you think work for you, and away you go. The hackle pliers are useful for a broad variety of things. Anytime you're winding something on a hook, hackle pliers are a good idea. So, next thing up is these half-hitch tools and this whip finisher. Half-hitch tools have holes of different sizes. You can see, and these are even smaller down here. When you're finished tying a fly, you want to knot it off so the thread doesn't unravel. The half-hitch tool allows you to do that. The whip finishing tool does the same job, but you can use your fingers. And it doesn't take any time at all to learn. A couple of minutes, you'll have learned how to do a half-hitch with your fingers. So you don't need these tools if you don't want to buy them. You just can use your fingers to do the half-hitch. But you can buy the whip finisher or the half-hitch tools, and they'll do the job for you. They'll work. They work fine. You don't have to buy them if you don't want to. The last thing I'm going to show you is a hair stacker. If you're using a lot of hair to tie wings, sometimes we want that hair stacked so the ends are level, and this allows you to stack it. You put the hair in, and you give it a few whacks, and it lines up all the ends of the hair, so when you put it on, everything's nice and neat. Again, not a tool you need to buy when you're starting out, but it's something that you should know about. The last thing I'm going to show you is the Bodkin. It's basically a needle with a handle, and it's handy for picking stuff out when you really want to get in there and, pick away at material to line stuff up and what have you, apply head cement. There's lots of different uses for a Bodkin. So, there you go. These tools will get you started. This set I've got in front of me, you can tie a huge range of flies with. There's tons of different flies you could tie with these tools. But if you want to go with the minimum, I would say a vise, good scissors, bodkin, threader, hackle pliers. That's it. You can tie flies with just that. And you don't need anything more. So if you're on a real budget, that's the way to go. And I would recommend going into a fly shop with a list and picking out what you want and getting the best quality you can afford, because it does really count, especially with scissors, and going from there. And down the road, you can add more. Like I said, some kits out there are pretty decent. They've got some reasonably good quality tools and materials in them, but you're buying stuff you probably will never use. And in the end, you're better off buying what you need as opposed to, let's buy a bit of everything and hope for the best. So there you go. A little brief rundown on fly tying tools, and give it a try. I mean, it's you can get in there for a pretty minimum amount of money and get started. So give it a try. Cheers.